the beautiful LaTosha Brown. She's a political activist. She is considered the person in which you want to make sure you have on your side if you are getting ready to run for any office, especially in the South. She's joining us on this edition of Naked.
AT&T Dream in Black wants to celebrate you, the change makers, innovators, and visionaries uplifting their communities. If that's you, you don't want to miss the chance to power even greater possibilities. Enter the AT&T Black Future Makers contest for a chance to win $10,000 and an AT&T 5G-enabled device. You got this. Learn more at attdreaminblack.com/contest. Must be 18 and older. Other restrictions apply.
Hey, it's Elvis Duran. Just like you, I love listening to podcasts. Sort of like you're doing right now, right? But after you finish, when you're ready to hear the hits, I invite you to check out Z100, New York's #1 hit music station. We play the biggest songs from the biggest stars, like The Weeknd, Ed Sheeran, and Doja Cat. Listen live on Z100 in New York or wherever you are on our iHeartRadio app.
Champion and carry champions to be a champion. A champion and carry champion and carry champion. A champion and carry champion and carry champion. Greatest in sports and entertainment, connected with. In a world where vulnerable considered weak, come and remove the veil from entertainment's elite. It's the difference between what is real and what the public sees. So here's your favorite celebrities behind the scenes. It's refreshing, authentic, the whole story, specific, life-altering events that shape the person that you hear. We got a champion and carry champion. Hey girl, you did it. It's the greatest in sports and entertainment, connected with us. Every champion and carry champions to be a champion. A champion and carry champion. Hey girl, you did it. Got a champion and carry champion and carry champion. Greatest in sports and entertainment, connected with us.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to Naked. I have very intentionally been interviewing people who I am obviously friends with, but people who I admire and people who I respect who are in the political arena. And that is purposeful because I feel like now is the time to make sure that we're paying attention and understanding what it means for us to vote, to be a part of society. And I don't want to hear voting doesn't matter, it doesn't count. You hear the same response, which is if it didn't matter, they would not work so hard to stop our vote. Today on the podcast, creator, co-founder of Black Voters Matter, LaTosha Brown will be joining us. So here's a little cheat code for you. She is a friend. And as just a Black woman to Black woman, I adore her and everything she represents. She has a certain je ne sais quoi about her. Her spirit is special. And you can feel it. So when I see her and I talk to her and I ask her about being a political activist, that word for many people can be off-putting or people could feel insecure about describing themselves as an activist. And that was one of the first things in which I asked, because she is activated. When I am around her, I want to do more. I want to be more. I want to be better. And when I say her heart is pure, and that she is doing it for the people. And you hear that often, but listen to me. This next hour and some change, get your spoon, get your fork, get your knife. You're about to be fed. She is talking about why it matters, especially in the Black culture, to vote. Vote, vote, find your power, use your power, have leverage, vote, vote, vote. It is not about being for the red team or the blue team, as she put it. It is about really taking agency over your own person and using your power for good. And if we understand that, and we just didn't get distracted with whether I'm a Republican or a Democrat, we would be winning. LaTosha Brown with a word on Naked. So I have some research here. And sometimes everything you read on the internet isn't true. I can also ask our friends, which I have, but I want to go with the very beginning. And before I describe you to everyone, I think a lot of people refer to you as an activist. What does that mean to you, that word in itself?
That's an excellent, I don't think I've ever been asked that question in that way. You know, when I hear it, what it means to me is a person that, that is dedicated to moving people to action. that when I think about activists, it's interesting that you asked me that question, because when I think about activists, I remember the first time I was called an activist, and I was thinking to myself, I don't know if I deserve that title yet, because I was thinking about people like Dr. Martin Luther King, and I was thinking about Angela Davis and others, and I didn't see myself in that same kind of category. And so it was such an esteemed position to me around someone that's an activist. I'm like, that means you getting down, right? And so for me, what I realized, though, is that all of us have the opportunity, if we choose, to be activated, like to use our power, to use our energy to activate ourselves and activate others. And so I have dedicated my life to activating others, because I think that's where the real power is. How do we activate the human spirit? How do we activate love? How do we activate some power? How do we shut some stuff down? Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, that's kind of how I see it around that part of me that wants to do something, that wants to see action. And so I use that energy to activate myself so I can activate others. So that's what I think of when I think about an activist.
Growing up as a kid in the South, Selma specifically, to me, it makes sense that you would be an activist based on where you lived and what you know, if you've paid attention to your history, if you were involved in your community. How'd you grow up?
That's true, I think, on some level around Selma, but believe it or not, my family felt like they were very clear. You're going to go to school, you're going to get a degree, you're going to get your husband, you're going to get you a good job with some good benefits, and that's how this going to roll, right? And so even early on, my activism wasn't necessarily something that my family was like trying to push me towards. As a matter of fact, that seeing activists be murdered, that activists in our community had financially were struggling. The activists in our community oftentimes were embittered, and many times they were beat down. And so, they wanted me to go another mainstream route because they thought it would bring protection to me. And I would love to say that it was my environment that created, and maybe on some level that's true, that created this space for me to become an activist. But the truth of the matter is, it's kind of in the words of Lady Gaga. In some ways, I think I was born this way. I never, I'm serious. Like, I remember being a little kid. I always tell this story about, I like Easter shoes. I guess I still like shoes, right? And so I had, this is where it all starts from. But I had these patent leather Easter shoes. Do you remember the patent leather shoes that if you scuff them, they would have the black scuff mark on them? I had these patent leather Easter shoes, and I was a little kid. I was like in kindergarten or something. And I never, ever, ever could stand seeing people take advantage of other people. I don't know what something about me would get activated when I would see this. And so I remember one Easter, I got these white patent leather shoes and some socks with some ruffles around it. And you can tell me nothing. It didn't matter if I had on jeans. It didn't matter if I had on shorts. I was wearing my Easter shoes, right? To the point where even in my family, it was kind of like a joke. It was like, she gonna put them Easter shoes on. I sure was. And so I remember there was this fight. There was on my block. There was these big boys that were getting ready to, that were messing with this little boy, right? Who I knew was scared and who was afraid. Now here I am. I'm the run of the bunch. I'm the smallest of the bunch. And I'm a girl, by the way, right? And there was nothing in my mind that I had any concern whether they beat me up or not. The only thing I was thinking about is, damn, I'm going to scuff up my Easter shoes. Other than that, I was ready for it. So I say that to say, in some ways, I never remember it always, my entire life, I was always kind of obsessed with two things. The first thing was I never liked to see people be treated unfairly or treated in a way that I thought that that's not right. I had this kind of sense of you should treat people well, right? And then the second thing is I always had this fascination with power. There's also a running joke in my family that anywhere we would go, and I often would go with my grandmother because I lived the first part of my life actually in Mobile, Alabama with my grandmother. We would go, wherever we would go, I would say, I called her Mama. I was like, Mama, who owned this? Who owns this? And she was like, well, we would be in Kmart. I was like, Mama, who owned Kmart? And she's like, baby, I don't know them people. Like, why are you asking me? It didn't matter where we went. Right? So I always had this desire, and I, it was a desire. Now, as I'm older, I realized I always had this fascination with power. I wanted to know who had the power to do things. And I always had this sense of that's something that you are not supposed to abuse. You're not supposed to use that against people. And so throughout kind of growing up, I mean, I had, for the most part, a relatively kind of normal childhood. My family's the bomb. Let me say that again. My family's the bomb. They were working class. They were working class, just really good people. That really, I think at the end of the day, more than anything, they didn't have money, but they really had a wealth of ethics and belief on how you treat people and how you move forward, and so and it was interesting because I had the extended family experience. It was my grandparents, and my grandparents were always old. My granddad was born in 1905. My grandmother was 1910. So I was like, I saw a picture when they were young and I was like, well, who are these people? They were always older people and old. And so, I had this wisdom of these older people that, I kind of grew under. And I think that was part of the shaping. That was part of my shaping. It was my brother and I. I think that was part of my shaping. And then this kind of natural inclination I had towards this kind of understanding power and feeling like we could, and I was a happy child. I was a child. I was like, everybody's supposed to be happy. Aren't you supposed to be happy? Like, how can I make you happy? And so all of those things, I think, shaped who I am, even as an activist before the politics. It was my humanity that actually shaped who I am. And it was the politics that kind of gave me some texture around, okay, how was necessary, how this whole thing around power, how it plays itself out and what I could actually do to actually shape that. And so that was part of, kind of how I grew up. I grew up with this notion of, and then seeing these different things that I didn't have the politics to understand it at the time. But I remember thinking, what is so magical about the railroad tracks? And no matter where I would go, right, on this side of the railroad tracks, the houses looked a certain kind of way. And that's where white people live, right? And then on this side of the railroad tracks, that's where Black people or people of color lived. And so there was something about that. I had a deep sense of, I don't know how to explain it, but that ain't right. Something ain't right about this. And so I always had kind of this inclination, which I do believe that is just a part of kind of a calling. And I'm not so certain that that's not in all of us, when I talk to children,
Yeah, it's right from wrong. The ability to see the difference in a positive way and a negative way, you learn that right away as a child. I could see you looking at these railroad tracks thinking, well, why is that like that and this is like this? Right. When I grew up, because I grew up in LA, I remember telling my mom, watching the news, I would only see Black people as gangsters and robbers and prostitutes and pimps. And it was always this image watching the news. And I was like, that doesn't represent my family. That doesn't represent the Black people I know. And while you're not able to articulate it, those images sit in your spirit. And I ask you because when I asked you what an activist is or was, and do you consider yourself one, I think about your story and how you have arrived to where you are today, and we're getting there. But you go to college, you don't finish college because you get pregnant. At that time, how did you see your life? Could you have said to pregnant, single LaTosha that you would have an influential voice in shaping how the South would be perceived for voting rights and fighting for people who can't speak for themselves?
This is going to sound different. I was getting ready to say one thing, but just kind of on my spirit, yes and no. No, in the sense that in that moment, I felt so deeply embarrassed. This was my last year of college. I'm the grandchild. I am in some ways, the golden child of my family. I always had good grades and, I didn't really get in trouble. I was actually a pretty good kid. And here it is that it's kind of like the worst fear for the girl children for our families. Like you getting pregnant, what? And so I remember my family did not respond at all like I thought they were going to respond. I was scared. I was literally probably almost 3 months pregnant before I told them. I was terrified of how I would tell them. And what was interesting is I remember calling my grandmother, because that's who I didn't want to let mama down. Like out of everybody, I mean, like my own mother, my aunt, all of them, but my grandmother, I'm like, that's my soulmate. And I remember calling her, and I remember she was like, She's like, well, baby, I guess we're going to have us a new little baby. That is not what I expected. I don't know what I expected, but that certainly wasn't it. Right. And so they never created a space for me to to live in shame, even though, I thought in high school, if I got pregnant, they were going to kill me. Like that was point blank. I was going to be dead. That was it. Right. And so, but once I was in college, they were, and I remember my grandmother saying, baby, you wrong. We're going to be fine. We're just going to have us a new little baby. That's probably one of the times that my family showed up for me in a way that I really understood the power of family, because it was very difficult. I wasn't just embarrassed for, how they would receive it, but I was embarrassed for myself. I was ashamed. I was ashamed. I felt I had let myself down. I felt like, okay, now how I'm going to continue, and I'm going to have this little baby to take care of. And, it was just all those things that as a young person, and at the end of the day, I got one of those kind of families, Cari. I got one of those families that everybody marry, even the people that don't like each other, they get married. Everybody going to get married. Right. The fact that I was single and I wasn't married, like it was just, all of those things, which I think is important for us to kind of realize how much sometimes this fear we hold in our head, and it's not really real, it's in our head. And so out of that, though, that was the best decision I made in my life, though, to go forward. Right. Because I had to own my power. I actually learned in that moment around owning your what you perceived as a mistake, and how you could really embrace it in a way that it would come, that it would become a blessing. I often, I don't know if I've ever publicly shared this story. I think, I actually had seriously contemplated, but I wasn't making a lot of money at the time. I think I was making like $6 an hour. I had attempted to have an abortion, and the challenge with it was I came up with the money. My son's father was really clear about he wasn't going to participate. I wouldn't even tell him. He was he wasn't going to participate. And so I saved up the money, and I had gone to, it's interesting, I had gone to an Arby's on my way to the place, and had some food, and got to the place, which was 2 hours away, the clinic 2 hours away, and my purse was gone. So all of this money that I had saved, and was a big deal for me because I wasn't making any money. It was done. It was gone. And so,
what happened?
I don't
Who stole
know.
the money?
My purse was gone. I don't know where my purse was. No, nothing. And so, I was like, okay, I will say this, it's a very long kind of story around how this happened. But when I was 7 months pregnant, by this time I had moved back home. We're excited. We're about to have the baby. And this particular day, I decided that I was going to go pick my baby's crib. I was going to go and get all this stuff for his crib. Because at that point I had leaned into it. And I got a letter in the mail from Arby's. And I opened up the letter, and it's like a $700 check. I'm like, what is this? Where is this from? So it's what essentially happened, which I had no idea earlier. My purse, I had left my purse in Arby's, and the manager and one of the workers stole it and split the money. And so the worker got caught stealing, and the manager fired him. And so the worker turned on him. And so Arby's wanted me to testify against him. I didn't. But
that was the money that was in your purse?
It was the same money. It was the same money. Yeah.
So they gave you your money.
They gave me my money back. Wow. Right. So it was just, that's why, I think part of what I really understand is I also understand I am a spiritual being having a human experience. And there's some things that I control, and there's some things that I do not control. Right. Mm-hmm. And so whenever I'm kind of led in spirit to move towards something, right. And even like I said, even the sense of justice, I didn't need anybody to politicize me to tell me that these houses don't look like these houses, and the people over there don't look like those folks. I didn't need a whole political story. I'm just looking at them like something ain't right with that. Why these people can't have houses like that, right? And so I think on some level, it is each of us have this sense there's an innate sense. Of course, we're socialized to believe some things are right and wrong, and that comes from a variety of things. But there's some basic pieces that a child, like hits another child, that child knows that's just not right. You're causing pain. And so I think that part of all of us, I'm hoping that even with my work, which is it's less political than it is around how do we awaken kind of this humanity in us to move us to action so that we're willing to actually be able to protect and prevent other people from causing harm. That's it. That's all I want to do.
You talk about humanity in such a beautiful way because this is the basics. Like we're born with that. We know that. We have that in us. How do we activate it is a beautiful question because everyone has to care. And what ignites us to care? We can get into a list of things that are happening right now. But for you, what was it? What was it that the single mother decided to do that really put you on the trajectory of essentially being the activist that you are today?
Listen, this is a funny story. When I moved back home, I went and found a job. I was 7 months pregnant. The same time, I was 7 months pregnant. And I decided I'm a worker. I'm just one of those folks. I was like, I just can't be sitting at the house. Like, I got to get me a job. So I literally went and found me a job at 7 months pregnant, got hired. And within 3 days, I got a promotion from, they hired me as a sales clerk. They took me to becoming a manager by the end of the week. This Korean family that I worked with was like, you are like amazing. I was like, okay, great. So this was more money. It was fine. Mind you, I'm 7.5 months pregnant now, but, in that space, what was interesting, I worked at this Korean clothing shop. And they were actually really gracious. I learned a lot from them around family.
Wait, but can I ask a question? What were you selling? What were you selling in the?
Listen, the cheap jeans that we like in the hood, you know, the color jeans and the.
And so you was at Rainbow before Rainbow.
Listen,
Fashion Nova before
Rainbow.
Fashion Nova.
It was called.
Okay.
Listen, I was at Fashion Nova. Listen, that is the best way to describe it. It was the Fashion Nova at the time, right? And so I was managing this clothing store, and I like to read. I'm an avid reader. Even though I think the internet has messed me up a little bit, I don't read as much as I used to outside of work. But I was an avid reader. I always take 3 books. I always have like a spiritual book. I always have a nonfiction and a fiction book. And so it's in this, it was a platform at the store that I work at. And a lot of folks like, you know, the Korean stores where they have the platform high so you can look around, they can watch the whole store, what's happening in the whole store. So I would always, I'd had my baby. I would always read these books, but I would always create like this soapbox. I would always tell people about the books I read. And so I would stand up on the platform to the point where my customers would come in and was like, well, what did you read this week? And so this particular week I had read Before the Mayflower. And so it had blown my mind. I was just like, I had blown my mind. And so I was at the counter and I was sharing all this information I learned from Before the Mayflower. And the crowd, my customers, it was like 5 of them, these sisters were sitting around and we were talking about it. And it was like I was holding court. Like I'm telling them I'm doing a book review basically. Right.
Yeah. You like, I'm Oprah's book club right now.
I am the Oprah's book club right now. Right. And this is in 1994. And so,
you was doing it.
I was doing it. And so as I'm doing that, there's this woman who doesn't say anything. I knew she wasn't from the area. She just standing in the cut. After I ring everybody up. She gets up and she says, you know, I have this program on Friday in the local housing community, in the public housing community. And you should really think about being an organizer. Because people like to listen to you. And I was like, okay. I was like, about my books? Right. And she was like, no, I think I think people would like to listen to you. And so you should come to this program. I would love for you to speak. I'd never spoken in public in that kind of capacity before. And so a couple of days later, I show up to this program and I was so nervous about it. I remember writing this speech. It was for young people who lived in this public housing community. And so I show up and I worked on this speech and I wrote this speech because that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to write out speeches. And I wrote this speech and I'm sitting in the audience and I go up to the podium and I look in the audience and I see Black kids everywhere. And I'm like, they don't want to hear this speech. And so I get up to the microphone and I was like, listen, y'all, I worked on this speech all week because this is like my first speech in this way. I was like, but y'all don't want to hear speech. Y'all want somebody. I was like, I'm just going to share what I feel. And I tore the speech up and the kids loved it. It was like, okay. And so right after that event, the same woman who worked with this organization called the Oasis Institute, she was like, I'm serious about being an organizer. You should actually, we're doing this project where we are organizing residents of public housing to become a part of this public housing, a residence council to create this governing body. And I was like, okay. And I started working with them and I was actually really, really good. Started being really good and I loved it. I loved talking to people. That's where it was like, okay, this is power. This is like, I'm talking to Black people. I'm like, okay, I like this. And I remember I didn't quit my other job and I was still as Ann's. It still was over at Fashion Nova, right? But I was doing this on the side and I loved it. I did it in Tuskegee, I did it in Selma. And then that experience really changed my life. There was a woman named Miss Carolyn. I often tell this story about how I became an organizer. And I was organizing, but this is how I became an organizer. We were having in one of the housing communities, they had a meeting at the end of the month and they needed to have people attend the meeting so they could set up this governing body. And so everybody said, if you want folks in Rangedale to come, you got to have Miss Carolyn. I was like, they were like, you got to go to Miss Carolyn. They told me where Miss Carolyn lived. I had gone around and canvassed the whole area. And so I went to Miss Carolyn's house, knocked on the door. She was like, come on in, baby. She was an older Black woman. And I came in and I'm giving her my whole spiel. She said, She never looks at me one time. She got young and restless. She was like, you look at the young and restless, baby. You need to look at what Jack and Nikki doing right now. And I was like, okay. So every time I try to talk about this thing, this residence council, she cuts me off. And she gonna tell me about Miss Chancellor and Jack and Nikki and like Victor. And I was like, okay. And I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get out of it. And so she was like, you want something to eat? She go and give me something to drink. And then literally anytime I open up my mouth, she started talking about it. So I sat there for a little while and I was like, okay. I left and I was like, I'm gonna go back. So a couple of days later, I'm back at her house. I do the same thing. She does the same thing. She cuts me off and it's not on TV now, but she still won't talk to me about the young and restless. So after a while, after that, I was like, I got to get Miss Carolyn. And so I kept going by there and we kept going through this little dance. Now I realized she was hazing me. I kept going through this little dance. And so at some point, I actually just enjoyed her. I just really enjoyed her when I would go by there. So I'll go by there. I try to talk to her about it. She'll talk about the young and restless and then we'll just talk. And then I'll leave. And so this particular day, I go in, I have my notepad, I put it in my book bag. I go in, this is after about 2 weeks. I go in, I put my book bag down and I sit down in the chair and I was like, what Jack and Nick did today, Miss Carolyn? And she said, real serious. Where is your clipboard?
Uh-oh.
I said, my clipboard? She said, your clipboard. I said, I put it in my bag. Well, why you don't have it? Didn't the people have you out here? Aren't you supposed to be organizing? I said, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. She said, well, where your clipboard? Don't you want me to sign it? And I said, yes, ma'am. So I take the clipboard out and she signs it. Right. And so
what's the lesson? What is the lesson in that?
That lesson in that was, it was the moment that I showed up for her. The moment that she knew I came to her house, not because I wanted something from her, but that I showed up like I saw her and I was with her, right? That moment is the moment that literally I organized. And from that day, it has changed my life. That I never that whatever I'm organizing for is never greater than the people that I'm organizing. Sometimes people are organizing you and asking you to sign something. You're just a number. They're just trying to get their numbers up, or they don't care about you. They don't care about your day. They don't care what's going on with you. It was over that period of 2 weeks that Miss Carolyn hazed me, essentially. I learned to care about her and love to spend time with her. And so the day that I walked up in her house, that I didn't care nothing about her signing that paper. Right. That was like, at the end of the day, I was there because I wanted to spend time. I wanted to see Miss Carolyn. I wanted to know how she was doing. I wanted to hear about what she was interested in. That was the moment that I organized her. And 3 days later, when the meeting happened, it was packed. And guess how it got packed? Because Miss Carolyn got on the phone and called the folks. And so I have never forgotten that. And I think anything that we do, I mean, that's the part of kind of the humanity piece, anything we do. But that has also been my approach with Black Voters Matter in the way that I organize. That if I'm organizing, I've seen people who are registering folks to vote. And then someone says, well, I got a felony. And they were like, oh, and they just walk by. That ain't my position, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you matter because you matter. Like, you don't matter. Even this phrase around, if you don't vote, you don't matter. How disrespectful that is. At the end of the day, you matter because you're a human being, right? You voting is you using that agency to come out of that. And so that has been my organizing approach from that day forward, that I would never organize in a way that that did not put the people who I'm organizing first, that they would be centered. And then the issues and everything else would be wrapped around that.
And so you have led me to where I was going to go. That is a beautiful statement. It's about the people first and everything else after that.
That's right.
And due in large part why you have been able to have the audience with the people you have audience with, how it's why you're able to make phone calls and be influential in presidential races, and really truly work from a place of what do the people need. You ran for elected office twice in Alabama. It did not come to fruition. To my naked eye, that was great because it put you in a position to meet people, to realize that you're what other qualities you have, as in consulting. Right. So you start these businesses. You out here moving, but arguably probably the most notable is Black Voters Matter. Talk to me in 2016 how that all came about, obviously based on the work that you had been doing years before.
I'm glad you raised that I'd run for office. I had been a organizer, a youth organizer, and every issue you can name, from criminal justice reform to education, all of those things I had worked on some level. The first time I ran for office, I didn't think that I was anyway. I didn't think I would be a viable candidate. It was really it was for the Board of Education because of the way that they were treating young people and the way that there was this inequity of how certain schools were funded and others weren't, right? And so I wound up getting in that race to actually create a platform to literally be able to talk about the issues that I didn't hear anybody else talking about, right? And so ultimately in that race, what I did, that's how I got introduced to voter suppression, which goes back to kind of with Foundation for Black Voters Matter. In that race, long story short, in that race, it was so hard to call that it took them 7 days to call the race. And I ultimately lost by, at the time, it was 117 votes. And so the race was called on the 7th day, which means, and I thought that I lost. It was fine. I moved on. I called my opponent and said, congratulations. And so the race was certified at 12. At 12:05, I got a phone call from my mentor, who was a senator. And then at 5 minutes later, I got a phone call from the head of the Democratic Party for the state saying, starting off apologizing to me, saying, LaTosha, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm like, okay, I'm thinking to myself, well, I know I lost, but I was like, well, I didn't know he was like supporting me like that. But that's not what he was talking about. What he was talking about was a sheriff in one of the counties called and said that he forgot that he had 800 ballots, absentee ballots, that he had placed in a safe. And so in my naivety, I'm like, oh, well, that's good, because that's a county that I carried. And so, of course, those votes were cast before the election. So I'm thinking they're going to count the votes. He was like, no, the race is certified. I was like, what does that mean? He was like, that means they don't count. And so it was really at that moment, I remember feeling so powerless. I'm like, y'all just going to let them steal a race? They just going to steal a race? And there was no repercussions for that, right? And so that was like one of my first, like, in my face around how voter suppression, and then I found out even after that had happened to me, I was talking to others that was so common, that it was a common, like what we saw happen with Stacey Abrams in 2018 and across the board, that in these places we see this kind of backlash. And so ultimately in 2016, Cliff Albright and I, who is the other founder of Black Voters Matter, we have been doing organizing work up from 2000 together all the way up to for 16 years. And so what we wanted, there was three things. We were very clear. We were tired of this narrative, like Black people in the South were powerless. The second thing is that we knew that as organizers, part of when you're challenging power outside of, we couldn't depend on just a political party. We were like, this is about independent Black political power. And in order to do that, we've got to really be able to control the mechanism. We can't wait for this person to send us $5. We've got to figure out how we're going to build infrastructure ourselves. Because oftentimes in those elections, what you would see is, some resources may or may not hit the ground, but if they did, it was 3 weeks out. It was too late. It was like, just round the Negroes up and let's go about our business. And so right. And we were not down with that. It was like, no, we're trying to build this ain't about participating. This is about how you build power. And so we created this organization, Black Voters Matter, and Black Voters Matter Fund. Ironically, we didn't have any money at the time, but we were real clear that what we wanted to do, we wanted to create a mechanism that would do 3 things. That 1, would put money on the ground, that we would fund grassroots groups. 2, that we would actually craft a message that Black people have power, that we would be centered in that message. And 3, that we will mobilize us towards that power, that we would not be it wouldn't be contingent upon a party or a candidate, that we wouldn't be candidate centered, that we wouldn't be party centered, that who we would be Black centered, that we would be centered around, we're engaged in this political process. And I'm the first to tell you, neither Cliff or I think that Black liberation is going to come through voting. That's not what we believe. What we do believe, though, is that voting is a vehicle, if at the very least, to reduce the harm happening to our community. That anything that is governing us, we have agency. We should be a part of that process. And then 3, that it is also a vehicle to be able to get resources in our community and policies that impact our lives. And so that's why we created it in 2016 with those 3 things in mind. We're going to move some money, we're going to create us a message, and we're going to mobilize some Black people.
Biggest victory thus far that you have been able to look back on and say Black Voters Matter did that. We rallied around the people. We took our power and we used it for good.
That's a hard one. I'll say it is a hard one and it's not. The one that's probably most obvious is the Senate race. Listen, we worked our tails off in the Georgia 2021 Senate race like that. Listen, that was a heavy lift. This is after, because I want to give people context. This is after the 2020 election, right? Which we already know was intense, right? This is intense to get people out. We have been working nonstop for years. And so 2020 is normally after presidential election. That's usually the time that you take a deep breath. Instead, here we've got these 2 Senate seats. And it's not just it's 2 Senate seats just locally. Now it has national implications. It will determine who actually controls who controls Congress, right? And so we immediately we never stopped. Matter of fact, we went hard in the paint. This was we were this was the playoffs. But we was like, no, this is the championship game right here. And so we worked.
Right. We in the finals. We got to win. Yeah.
We in the finals, baby. We got to win. Right. And I want people to be mindful. Yeah. This is COVID is happening. This is
everything's crazy.
We got Thanksgiving coming up. We got Christmas coming up. This is the holiday. The election is the week after the first of the new year. Who votes in the new year? Right. And so we have all of those dynamics, but we were so committed to literally at the end of the day, we were like, we're going to fight for power. At the end of the day, we were like, we're going to leave everything on the floor. We're going to give it everything we got, blood, sweat, and tears. And so probably the most, the most that we're known for and had the biggest impact, I would say, would be the 2 Senate seats in Georgia. At the race that I think actually put us on the map, though, was in Alabama. And it was a Senate seat. I don't know if people recall in 2017, there was a Senate seat in a state now that is 75% Republican. Right. Mm-hmm. A state that you got 25% of the population are African Americans. That was a heavy, heavy lift. But we knew we had some perfect storm issues working. We knew that there was a Republican candidate that was deeply flawed. We knew that we had this really moment because of that. And it's funny, it wasn't about the candidates. What we did is we shifted and created. That's why when you see the back of Black Voters Matter shirts, it says it's about us. That we wanted to shift this kind of this model around. Let's center us. It wasn't even about the candidate. I mean, Doug Jones is a really nice guy. I like him. I think he did an extraordinary job. Right. But it wasn't about him. Sure. It was about us. Right. And so we tested our message and our methodology. And as a result, we were able to flip a seat that was essentially impossible, right? In some ways.
Impossible to flip. And then just by way of background for those who are listening, because politics isn't always everybody's key. You talk about the 2020 election. A lot of people voted for Biden because you just didn't want Trump. That was the end result for a lot of people, myself included. But then you find the fact that just having him in office isn't going to help. We need some power. And that is why you say these Senate races are important, because you wanted to control. And you wanted the control. As long as Trump's cronies, if you will, or the people who, this is me speaking, the people who support him and still try to flesh out his agenda are not in control, that's when you can see some significant change. And here you are working to really make sure that we are focused. And I think that your importance, and especially the people who are on the ground, can also, people don't realize those are the heroes. If I hear another person say voting doesn't matter, it frustrates me beyond. And especially in the world and where I come from in sports, a lot of athletes didn't start voting. Their very first time voting was when Barack Obama ran for president.
That's right.
Then people were thinking Snoop had this big campaign to get his record cleared because he wants to vote. There were all of these people, as you know this better than I did. There were all of these people who really decided to be activated. So I go back to the original question in which I started with. How do we get people who could care less about Senate seats in Georgia and in Alabama to be activated, to help them understand that we're in danger? Everything is on the table now. How do we get people to care?
I think we have to really recognize, I think it's two words, white supremacy. We have to beat white supremacy at all costs. We have to really recognize this isn't about, this isn't about like these false equivalencies. Well, it's the Republicans and the Democrats and XYZ. Yeah, I understand all that. And I can say, yes, there's the Democratic Party has let us down, a Republican, but let's be real clear what we up against. And let's be clear about what Trump brought in, right? At the end of the day, what we have seen is we've seen an intensified kind of racialized environment, right? That you're just going to openly be racist. You're openly going to go against the rights of women, of LGBTQ community, of Black. We need to understand we're under attack. When you at war, you don't have the luxury of saying that you ain't going to fight. Somebody coming in your house and you ain't going to fight. If I ain't got nothing but a water bottle, I'm gonna beat the hell out of you with this water bottle, right? Right. And so I'm saying, when you are under attack, when your community is under attack, you have to protect your community at all costs. And so at the end of the day, whether you care or about all of the politics, I understand that. I understand some people get turned off from that process. But we also have to recognize this ain't about participation. See, there's some that want us to think this is about participating, right? No, this is about power. And you got to use every single tool that you have. It's kind of like how I am about my paycheck, right? I remember quitting a job and I had a paycheck left for maybe like $27. I know that ain't a lot of money, but I wanted my $27 and my 36 cents. I wanted every single nickel, dime, penny that was on my check, because that's my check, right? That's my power. And so at the end of the day, we have to be the same. We have to be the same way. You think money is power. Like, how do you think what policy is governing how you get money? Policy governs what money is in your pocket. Policy governs if the cost of your home. Policy governs how much you get paid, of the inequities of whether a white person is doing or another person is doing it, and a person of color gets paid differently. Policy determines every single aspect of our lives. And so what my position is I'm the main one to say that I don't believe that politics is the panacea, but you cannot afford to not pay attention when people are literally using an abuse of power to oppress your community and you not respond. At the end of the day, like, you might hit me. Like my uncle used to say, he used to whisper, he was like, baby, they hit you, hit them back. Like, you might hit me, but you're going to get hit back, right? At the end of the day, there is a space that we have to really get out of this framework of seeing politics just as this kind of this back and forth between two political parties, right? That yes, there's some element of that is true. And there's some element around, we don't have kind of some of the pieces in place that would make us happy. We've all been disappointed in this process. But at the end of the day, as long as policy is governing how much money comes in my pocket, as long as policy is governing where I live and if I get fair treatment or whether my college gets resources, I have no choice but to engage in that process. So I'm hoping people are more elevated in their thinking to really understand what time this is. If nothing else, you've got to use this vehicle to stop the harm that's happening to your community. Because at the end of the day, if you think politics don't matter, listen, come go to court with me. I can tell you what the difference is when a certain DA is in office that people have put in place from that community and when other DAs in office. That can make the difference between somebody get 5 years in prison or whether somebody gets a lifetime sentence for the same exact thing, right? I can tell if you don't think that that matters, I can tell you where there's been people who have literally fought to make sure that their communities get resources and others have not or actually worked against those communities. So we're not going to act like it ain't real and it doesn't matter. Now, will it solve all of our issues? Absolutely not. I don't believe that. I've never thought that, right? But what I do know is that when I am at war, I have to use every single tool available to be able to protect my community and move us forward. And so voting is one of those vehicles. It is one of the most powerful tools. That is why so much has been done throughout history to turn people off. It ain't by accident that people don't vote. Folks don't want you to vote. I mean, that's just the truth, right? So that there can be a small group of people that control the process so they can control the resources.
I told y'all, I don't lie to kick it. I told you she'd give us a word. We will be back with more LaTosha Brown.
Every champion and carry champions to be a champion. A champion and carry champion and carry champion. A champion and carry champion and carry champion. Greatest in sports and entertainment connected with.
AT&T Dreamin' Black wants to celebrate you, the change makers, innovators, and visionaries uplifting their communities. If that's you, you don't want to miss the chance to power even greater possibilities. Enter the AT&T Black Future Makers contest for a chance to win $10,000 and an AT&T 5G-enabled device. You got this. Learn more at attdreaminblack.com/contest. Must be 18 and older. Other restrictions apply.
Hey, it's Elvis Duran. Just like you, I love listening to podcasts. Sort of like you're doing right now, right? But after you finish, when you're ready to hear the hits, I invite you to check out Z100, New York's #1 hit music station. We play the biggest songs from the biggest stars, like The Weeknd, Ed Sheeran, and Doja Cat. Listen live on Z100 in New York or wherever you are on our iHeartRadio app.
Every champion and carry champions to be a champion. A champion and carry champion. That girl, you did it. Got a champion and carry champion and carry champion. Greatest in sports and entertainment connected with.
Welcome back. LaTosha Brown, still around. I was rhyming. I didn't even know it. There you go. I'm a poet. Take it away. If you haven't paid attention, for those who are listening, they are fighting left and right to take away our voting rights. You were very eloquent and very also passionate about being disappointed about voting rights not passing, legislation passing under Biden, and how he promised that, and how you, from my understanding, give me the background. You met with Kamala, you met with President Joe Biden. You all were really promised some good, if you will. How do you see this playing out now? I know you're disappointed, but where is the hope for you?
The hope for me is in people. We who believe in freedom shall not rest until it comes. Listen, I'm a Black woman. Let me just put it in context. I am a Black woman from the Deep South. And there's oftentimes the only thing that me and my people ever had is hope. The only thing that me and my people ever had is a relentlessness that we're going to continue until my community is free, until we get what we deserve. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, I'm not putting my hope in one president or one administration. Ultimately, it is my job. What I believe is to continue to organize, to build more power, to make it so that literally we have so much power that you ain't got the chance to tell us no. And so we're going to have to get to this place of like, I'm real clear around, and there are people who say, well, Joe Biden should have done this. He should have done. Absolutely. You're right. But at the end of the day, are you trying to make them? Because I am. At the end of the day, if we're not using our power and our leverage to make people show up, right? To make those things that we want are real. That's how things happen. And so we've got to use literally our capital. like not just our resources and money, but literally all of our human capital to push forward. Yes, I'm deeply, deeply disappointed that we didn't get in voting rights. We're seeing some of the fallout of that right now. This current attack on Roe v. Wade. Did we not think that was going to happen? What we're going to start seeing attacks on affirmative action, mark my words. We're going to start seeing attacks on gay marriage, all of those things. Because once you start letting democracy erode in such a way, when you start letting people be punished because they showed up and voted, then what you're doing is now you're also letting there be a corruption of power. And so at the end of the day, if we want change, what my belief is, it's not a matter of what person is in office. It's a matter of, do we have the power to literally be able to get the change that we want, to get the people that we want in office, and even those that we don't want in office. If you got big enough stick, you can get the kind of change that you want. And so I think a stick or carrot. And so my point is, part of what we have to see is I don't engage in this process of a transaction of an election. I don't think one election is ever going to change everything. That's not what I think. We have hundreds of years of oppression in this country, a system that has been rooted in white supremacy, that we've got to unravel every single aspect of that. And part of the unraveling is that when people who have been disenfranchised, that people who have been oppressed, that at the end of the day, when we show up, things are going to have to change. When we show up, we can literally change the trajectory of this country. But first of all, we're going to have to believe. We're going to have to believe in our own power. Getting people to vote isn't about me believing in the system. It's about me believing that people have the power to change things. And so that's the work that's going to move us forward. That's what we did in Georgia. People don't know what we did in Georgia. That's what we did in Georgia. And we knew we were in a state that they are openly cheaters, right? We knew that we were in a state that they will try to take an election, that they will move hundreds of thousands of people. But it's kind of like, if you come, if you go low, we going to go hard. And so what we did is we went hard in the paint, and that's what we'll continue to do. We cannot allow anybody to out-organize us. And we've got to be sophisticated enough to know that we need multiple tools. We need economic tools. We need political tools. We need policy tools, that we need institution building tools. And that if we're not working on those things collectively around how do we build independent Black political power in this context of nothing else, if you don't believe in engaging in this political process for nothing else, at least see it as a harm reduction strategy so that we can stave off some of the dangerous policy that impacts our people for years and their families.
If you don't believe in the process, that's fine. But if you engage in voting, you can see what happens. You could see that there is a way to stave off the harm, at least for now. That's how we combat. That's how we combat white supremacy. That's why how we combat all out attacks. And people can't understand that. They don't understand why their vote matters. And then at the same time, and you hear it so cliche, as you just mentioned, why they're fighting so hard to take it away from us. And so when our outlook is bleak, you truly rely in the goodness of people, in the hope of people, because you've seen what people can do, is what you're saying?
It is. It's not just this is this level of humanity, but it's also, I'm a visionary. So I actually believe, I often talk about the radical reimagining. Anywhere I go to talk here, I ask people, my first question almost in every talk that I do, I ask people to close their eyes and imagine, what would America look like without racism?
Oof.
Most people that I ask that question, 99% of the time, most of the time, like most people have never been asked that question. And so then my next piece around, they've never been asked that question. I'm like, well, how are we serious about ending racism? So we just going to live with this? Like, we're just going to live with this system? Like, how are we serious about racism? There's never been anything that's been brought into existence in the physical world that wasn't first envisioned. Not an iPhone, not even this technology that we're using right now. Someone had to envision it. So it has to be some of us that are creative enough, have the audacity to actually have a vision that is greater than what we see now. And that is what Harriet Tubman saw, right? This is a woman who could not read nor write, who had never seen the North, had never seen freedom, but there was something innate around her humanity that she knew that she was supposed to be liberated and she was supposed to be free. And she had a North Star. We're talking about a star up in the sky. Like literally the magnitude of what she really was seeing was a vision towards freedom. And so what we have to do is we have to really recognize, and because this is what I believe. I don't believe that Black liberation is contingent upon white acceptance. That's not what I believe. What
Because it
I
won't
believe
happen.
is, because it won't happen. But at the end of the day, what I also believe is that I do believe that in Black liberation is the liberation of all people. That I believe that fundamentally, as I fight to stand in the recognition of my humanity, that as I fight and stand in my agency, as I have the audacity to challenge those very systems that have sought to oppress my community, to oppress me, that in that there is something liberatory in that, and that will not only ignite the humanity in me, but the humanity in others. And if enough of us wake up, if enough of us are ignited, how the hell can things not change?
Girl, you giving me a word, a whole word. Okay, so I haven't imagined America without racism. What does that look like for you? I don't even know. I don't know, LaTosha.
Why? I mean, how would we know what it looks like, right? Right? Because we've not seen that. We've not been there before. What I can tell you is, I know a work day would look different. That's what I know. What I know is the way that we actually kind of exploit human beings. I know that would be different. Mm-hmm. I know that institutions would look very, very different. I know the justice system would look very, very, very different. We might even have a space around where we've seen other countries that have actually eliminated, right, jails, that have shut jails down, right? What I know, and I think that that's part of the reason why I asked the question, is not so much around the vision of what I have, because I'm speculating like everybody else. It is really around the power in the question. We should be in that inquiry of what it looks like, what are the possibilities, so that we can actually have our North Star of really what we're fighting for. I'm not fighting for it to be the blue team or the red team next year, for the next 4 years. I don't want just a transaction of change. I want a complete transformation of change. The whole notion of, like, at the end of the day, why the hell we working 40, 50, 60 hours a week? Seriously. Like, at the end of the day, there's technology. I often talk about just using your imagination. Like, we've got technology now that can actually can do what 1,000 people used to be able to do in a week. What did we do? If there was 1,000 people and now the technology came along and you only needed 100 people, you know what the companies did? They they fired the 900 people and kept the 100. You know what they could have done? What they could have done is kept all 1,000 of the people, have them work 10 hours a week, make more money, right? Use the technology, work people less. And so that the means of production, that the technology that created the expansion of the means of production, some of that benefit could have gone down to the workers. Like, there's no reason why we can't do that. But it's going to require us radically reimagining what a work day would look like, what a work week would look like. What would be so wrong with people working 10 hours a week, getting paid, spending time with their families, spending time with their children, doing the work? What's so wrong with that? I would say rich people don't think nothing wrong with it, right? So I think
rich people are like, yeah, we've been doing that. What y'all doing?
We've been doing that. Hell, I'm working in the Maldives this week. I mean, what? Right? And so I think that's why it has to be, we have to radically reimagine and recognize that every single system in this nation has been rooted in white supremacy, right? There's just like every single, give me one: education, finance, politics, give me one, right? And so I'm saying that every single one, that what are the possibilities that exist, that if people were able to operate in the fullness of their power? And part of eliminating racism, I would say to you that we have no idea of how amazing life could be. We have no idea of what could be created. Think about what we've created, right? When people have been not even being free. Think about the amazing artists in our community that has never been able to get the kind of support that they need, right? To develop that. Think about the what happens to, a genius that comes out a certain kind of way. And to some people, it may look like autism, right? But because they haven't had the support or have the kind of things that they need to move forward. My point is it just boils down to this, that if we want something different, while we are moving to create, we have to move and create the environment that actually makes it more conducive for us to have the freedom of expression, for us to have the freedom of creativity, for us to actually ponder on that question.
Yeah, because we don't have it.
Because we don't have it. So we should be asking ourselves every single day, what would America look like without racism? We should be having those discussions. We should be thinking about what it would take right? Not how do we eliminate racism? I got that. I mean, that's part of my work, but I'm asking another question. What would it look like? Right? What's our vision of that? Right? And until we're able to actually vision different components, and all of us we're going to have different aspects of that. That's okay. Right? That gives us something that allows us to transcend this, what we see, and go to the next level. That is the same thing that those brothers and sisters, that my ancestors that were in Alabama and Mississippi and sitting on a plantation somewhere saying, I ain't never seen freedom, but my children going to be free. Right. There was somebody that saw that. When I think about Afrofuturism, when I think about probably this is part of the reason why I love the comics so much and why I love, Marvel movies. Like there's something powerful with using our creativity and our imagination because it's boundless. And we've got to think about that when it comes to racism and other things.
I didn't believe in Wakanda till I saw it. I didn't believe in my black superhero till I saw it. So I appreciate you for saying that. And you left us with, wow, so much to think about. I love that question. Imagine an America without racism. I'm going to go to work on that, LaTosha Brown, because I don't even know what that looks like. And that makes me sad for me, but I know that I can envision it if you can see it, if there are others who can see it. That's what gets us activated. Listening to you talk and be so passionate, everyone listening right now should be activated. If they're not, I feel sorry for you. That means you don't have a soul, because I have been moved. LaTosha Brown, what can I tell people to look forward to for you before we let you go? Because I appreciate all the time you gave me today, sis. I really do. But I know that you have a couple of things coming up. If you'd like to announce here, or we could do it later. I don't know. What you got going on?
Yeah. So I've got some cool stuff happening. This is a space of that I'm going into at this stage of my life around creativity and speaking truth to power and using this moment to build hope. We talk so much around, politics can be draining because we talk about so much around what's wrong and how this is happening. Some things got to be exposed. Some things they got to die. I mean, they just got to die on the vine so something else can come in its place. And so that's why I think it's dangerous for us just to focus on the here and now and to not be imaginative. And so in that space, I'm actually doing more work. I'm really excited. I got my first commencement address this weekend, and then I've also will be I'm really excited about keynoting for the Black Harvard graduation. So I'm super excited.
Excuse me, did you say Harvard?
I did. I'm excited. It is. I'm really.
That's beautiful, LaTosha. Like seriously, that is
with the black students, the black students with the black graduation. I mean, come on, the black graduation.
Come on, it don't get no better. Tell Katanja I said hi. Is she there? I don't know.
Right. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about the work that we're doing in communities. Like, look now, y'all know we got the Blackest Bus in America. If you don't know about it, go Google it. The Blackest Bus in America. We in these streets. Now we go hard. We're going to be in these streets. So if you want to know how you can be down with Black Voters Matter, and at the end of the day, all you've got to do is text us, text to 25225. If you forget that number, just spell it out black on your phone. It spells black.
Hi.
So
text black.
Text black. Text voting to 25225 or voting to black. And so you can keep up with what we're doing. Follow me on social media. I put a lot of the work that we're doing because we're going to do a lot of activations. I do think this is a moment, and I say this often, even though I do a lot of political work, Cari, at the end of the day, it's not our politics that are going to save us. It's our humanity.
You said it's not about the red or the blue team. It is about our humanity. So don't get caught up. Yes. I'm with it.
And our humanity, we got to say, this is enough. We've got to say, no, we're not going to keep stockpiling where some people got to sleep in their cars and go to work every day while others don't, like literally living whatever life. I want everybody, what's wrong with everybody being prosperous on some level? Right? What's wrong with everybody having their basic needs met? What's so bad about that? It will not happen unless people force it to happen. And so we've got to really recognize what we're up against. This isn't a matter of around, what political party. At the end of the day, we've got to really make this entire system. We've got to transform this entire system, uproot whatever we got to do, abolish it, replace it, whatever we need to do to make sure that our humanity is always respected and that our agency is respected and that we literally create the kind of nation that we desire and that we deserve. And the only way we're going to do that is we got to be activated.
And we was promised. It might not have been for us, but I'm taking it. It's mine. Thank you.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of what?
Happiness.
I want all of that.
All of that. And I'm up here with you. Give me 10 hours of work week and give me all the money. I just need 10 hours. I can get shit done in 10 hours, y'all, for the week. And I'm done. All right. LaTosha Brown, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. I really, as always, sister, I enjoy you. And thank you for just bringing so much joy and light to the world. You bring so much joy.
Voting matters, guys. And I hope that if that's not the one thing you took away from this entire podcast, voting matters. They would not fight so hard to stop you from voting if it did not matter. If you pay attention to the state in which you live in, and you'll see all around you, whether it's obvious or not so obvious, little ways in which they are removing the ability for Black and brown people, for marginalized people to be left without a voice and a vote. It is important that we pay attention. I know there are primaries coming up in different people's neighborhoods, depending on where you live. And I really want you all to know that it is important. No matter what it looks like, it is important. Read a little bit once at night. Maybe before you walk into that voting booth, pay attention to who these people are who are trying to actually represent you in this world that we live in today. Black Voters Matter co-founder LaTosha Brown gave us a litany of things, a few things of which, rather, that you could go and check out and possibly help with and look out for, especially when it comes to her and what the work she's doing. But check out Black Voters Matter. It really is important, folks. I appreciate you for letting me get on my soapbox. Cari Champion signing off. I'll talk to y'all next week on Naked.
AT&T Dream in Black wants to celebrate you, the change makers, innovators, and visionaries uplifting their communities. If that's you, you don't want to miss the chance to power even greater possibilities. Enter the AT&T Black Future Makers contest for a chance to win $10,000 and an AT&T 5G-enabled device. You got this. Learn more at attdreaminblack.com/contest. Must be 18 and older. Other restrictions apply.